Hi everyone, Tracie here. So today we're going to talk about how do you know, but I don't. I used to wonder how people had access to information besides education, the media, hearing things from other people. And it was very curious to me when they knew something that I didn't have access to, because the mind will automatically assume that it knows just by hearing information. The mind doesn't really know. It doesn't have the capacity to know, because knowing actually exists in consciousness, which we'll talk about those three levels. But let's say I hear that Fred was fired from a job, and I would go around and pass that information. Oh, Fred got fired, but I don't really know that he got fired unless I was there and experienced it and witnessed it and saw it happen. So I am passing on information without any verifiable experience to actually know if that's true or not. So a lot of times the mind will just assume that it knows just because it hears something. There are other times where people will share information that I don't know, and I'm thinking, how do they know when I don't know? What do they have? How do they have access to things that I don't seem to have access to? And it was a mystery to me until I realized what was actually going on. And there are three levels of consciousness. There's a whole study about consciousness, but consciousness basically is awareness. And what goes on in consciousness is the content. The context is consciousness itself that holds all things. But let me try to make it simple. The three levels are: one, the unconscious. That means we don't know. We're unaware. Some people will call that denial, but you're not denying something that you're not aware of, because who really will deny something that they're aware of? And the answer is nobody. So, there are, let's say alcoholism. Somebody says, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, and they don't do anything to change their life or whatever. So they live knowing they're an alcoholic. That is more of the subconscious. So the second one is the subconscious, which means we're partially aware of something, but we don't completely know why. Let's say why we're an alcoholic or why we're doing what we're doing. About a decade ago, I was attacked by a patient at work, and I lost consciousness. And for a long time, I was trying to remember how exactly I hit my head and got the injuries that I did. And my neurologist had to tell me, Tracie, you're not going to remember because you were knocked unconscious. I mean, it's almost like we will force ourselves to try to bring into our awareness that which we're not conscious of to try to understand something. So the term spirituality to me means the unmanifest, the invisible, that which can't be seen, but it can be known. It's beyond proof. It's beyond science, because science requires proof. That's how they prove it to you that it is. So in spirituality, the understanding that something greater than me, or what I am holding in mind, a field, exists in order for me to have access to bring what I'm holding in mind, or what's creating suffering. And I'm talking psychological suffering here, physical pain, breaking your leg is, I'm not talking about that. That's a whole different realm, but I'm talking about psychological suffering, emotional suffering, feelings, attitudes, how we treat other people, and our behaviors. In order to bring that, to be aware that does exist, and then to ask for help in understanding something, because the ego in and of itself can't undo itself. So there has to be something greater than myself, and that's a spiritual, that's what I call the spiritual, the unmanifested. If it wasn't for the unmanifested, I couldn't even move my hands like this. There is life force energy that gives life to all things, including these bodies. And so I will ask, how can I see this different? What am I supposed to be seeing about this? And then from consciousness, because the brain's a receiver, and we attune to different levels of the field, and then we can understand a thing. So that brings me a knowing that I previously didn't have before. It also brings from the unconscious a way to actually acknowledge something so that it can have healing. I can't heal something I'm in denial about, and neither can you. We're going to disown or deny things if we can't see them. So the subconscious can be a little tricky. Let's say that somebody's really angry and they are screaming, and somebody else responds, "Why are you so angry?" And the first person will say, "I'm not angry." And so they will deny the fact that they're angry. So they're sort of conscious, but they might be in their head and having really good reasons for why they're angry. And so they feel justified, but they aren't at the point where they're conscious of their anger, where they can actually own it or move through it. And so they're denying it right to someone's face. And they're not doing that on purpose. It's that it hasn't manifested consciously yet to that person. So the unconscious, we have buried our traumas, especially from childhood, into our psyche, and because we didn't want to face it, or we didn't have enough power to face it, or we thought we would die, or we wouldn't be able to handle it. So we project it out there onto other people and actually believe it's coming from out there. And then we'll judge it out there and make it wrong or bad when actually it's coming from in here. You know that movie, it's this horror movie where this woman's babysitting. She keeps getting these crank phone calls, and anyway, the police finally trace the call, and it's coming from inside the house, and they call her and they say, "We've traced the call, it's coming from inside the house, get out." Well, when we realize that we can't get away from ourselves, that there's nothing that we can actually do, it's not coming from out there. When it has been brought from your unconscious into your conscious, and now you know that all your suffering is being caused by you, and now you have to deal with it. You have to actually move through these eons of time of pain, could be past lifetimes of pain that we didn't have enough power to move through. And that is where things really start to get good, even though you're dealing with a bunch of crap, because we unconsciously refuse to move through pain. I mean, it makes sense. So when we're ready, and when we can handle these stacks that come up, then we become aware of them. Then we can own them. They don't have to be buried in our unconscious, and we don't have to project them as coming from other people and then deny that we're doing that. So, but it's done innocently. Everybody, how responsible are you when you're unconscious? You can't really deal with something and make changes. So to ask to have it brought up is actually a gift, because it can actually be handled at that point. It's interesting, but the world is full of people with addictions, and one of the biggest addiction is overlooked, and we have an addiction to thinking. We actually have given allegiance to our thinking mind, and we trust in it more than we trust in God, more than we trust in love, more than we trust in peace. And we have to go home and think about this, or let me think about it, and so thinking is a tool, but we actually believe that's who we are. If I have access to thoughts, I take possession of them, and now they're mine. And anyone that says differently, I now have to have a defense posture or agreement to a thought that doesn't even belong to me or you. It just belongs to the field itself, and we attune to it based on really what our intentions are. So the question, how do you know and I don't, or how do I know and you don't? The good news here is we exist in consciousness, and we have access to even genius. We have access to genius. And the more relaxed we are without stress, the more peaceful we are, the higher of the probability that we have access to information that the media doesn't have, that our educators don't have, the ministers, the preachers, we have access to high levels of truth. Being in a state of relaxation, being in a state of stress, we don't have access to it. There's actually no room for it to come into. So it's not really how do you know that I don't, or how do I know that you don't? It's that we have access to genius. We have access to all creativity, and to bring into our conscious life and our present awareness the ability to be joyful and without stress the majority of our time here. And just because we bought the beliefs and we bought what the mind said doesn't mean we have to continue to do that. And how are you going to know? Unless somebody shares that it is possible. You can only believe them and have faith that what they're saying is true. Oh my God, to be in this world, this crazy world with death and trauma and drama and chaos, that it is possible to actually have life that's full of joy, like over 95% of the time, where before there was all this sensitivity and all of this suffering. And so I think that's the good news, that you can't know what you don't know. And then when you know, then you can do something about it to change it, because the way that we hold things in mind and how we frame things actually creates the suffering. And so anyway, we trudge on, and we enjoy life to the fullest. And everybody is always choosing what they believe to be the good. And so we let them off the hook for our own peace. Peace to you. Out.